Susan May here in Perth, Western Australia. I'm so thrilled to be here talking for the Mystery Thriller Week, and I've chosen a topic that's dear to my heart, which is how to write a book in 28 days. I guess that sounds almost impossible, doesn't it? But it's not. It's a bit of, maybe a little bit of practice beforehand, and it's a mental attitude. So I'm just wondering if anybody's joining me today, but what I'll do is I'll keep talking, and this is recorded, and you can watch it at any time, which is handy. So you probably may not have heard of me, but I'm a thriller author. I write dark thrillers, so a lot like Stephen King and maybe Dean Koontz, and you know, any author that scares the pants off you. That's what I aim to do, and give you nightmares even. I try my hardest. So I've written 3 novels, a novella. In fact, I've written 5 novels, but 2 I've never published. I've got 1 totally finished, and I've got 1 3/4 finished, which is about, I think, 500 pages, and I gave up. That was the first one I tried. And then the second one I tried, I got up to the second draft, and it's telling me my connection is weak. So I hope this is broadcasting, but I think it is. Anyway, I'll keep going, and if it disappears, I'll have to change venues and go up to the kitchen. I'm in our theatre room at the moment. So anyway, I've got a book that I've got up to the second draft, and I think it's actually quite good, but then something happened and I decided I would scrap continuing with that. I planned to do something with that, but I then, what happened was I wrote a short story for an anthology, and it was a time travel anthology, and I wrote a short story called Back Again, and I sent it to an editor who I'd never used before, but I thought I'd give her a try. Sort of had a bit of a breakup with my old editor, which I had something to do with who was working on the anthology with me. Anyway, and she wrote to me about 3 days after she'd edited it, and she said, I've been thinking about this short story, and I actually think it would make a great book. And I was still working on this other book that I'd got up to the second edit, and it was so slow. I'd been working on it for maybe, gosh, almost 2 years. It took me a year to draft it, and then another year to do the editing on it. And it just seemed like I'd never get it finished. So when she wrote to me, she said, she's a published author as well, and she's got a publisher. And she said to me, you know, if you can turn this into a book, I'll send it over to an agent friend of mine in LA, and I think you've got a good chance of getting this published. And at the time, I thought I wanted a publishing deal, which I don't now. I'm an indie author, and I'm doing pretty well, so I don't really need a publisher at the moment. So I thought to myself, you know, I don't actually want to spend too much time on this, because I don't think I can turn this short story. It was about 13,000 words at the time, which is about 40 pages. And I didn't think I could turn it into a novel. So I told myself I would spend no more than a month adding maybe 50,000 words to turn it into a novel. And it was kind of a throwaway goal, because I didn't think I could do it. But I thought, well, I'll give it a try. And that way, all I've wasted is 30 days when I probably won't be able to finish this novel. So I set a goal, and I worked out how many words I had to write a day, and I finished it in 27 days. And that was the quickest that I've ever written. And after I'd finished it, I realised it's not as hard as I thought. So as soon as I finished the edits on that, of course there were edits and they take more time. So it took me a few months, maybe 3 months to get that book totally ready to be published. By the time I did about 3 or 4 more edits and sent it back to the editor and said, hey, I did turn it into a novel, thank you. And she loved it, so all was good, and it was published. So while it was over with her to be edited, I came up with the idea for Deadly Messengers, my next book. And I thought, well, I wrote that in 27 days. How long can I write this book in? So I did exactly the same process, and same, I wrote it in a month. I wrote the first draft in a month. So by the time the other book came back from the editor, I put down Deadly Messengers and I finished the first draft, and maybe I got halfway through the second edits or second draft. So yeah, I did back again. Then I went back to that book, and then when that book was finished and published and went through the whole process of editing, which I do a few edits and then I give it to the editor and then I go through it all again, I got on to my next book, which was The Troubles Keeper. And that one took me a bit longer because, not because I spent more time physically writing it, but because by then Deadly Messengers was doing really well. And when your books start to do well, there's a business side that you have to deal with, and that takes a lot of your time away, and you can't just focus on writing. So it took me a little bit longer, but technically not that long, a few months. My goal is always to get a couple of books out a year. That's what I'm aiming for. It's getting harder and harder as I guess I think of my writing as a business. So as the business grows, it gets harder and harder to just do the writing, because that's not everything that you have to do. But anyway, we're here to talk about how you write a book quickly, I guess. And if you write it in 28 days or 10 days or 2 months or a year, I guess the real goal is to get the book finished. And I think my belief is that if you take too long to write a book, you lose momentum. So the best thing I think you can do if you've not finished a book is to actually set a goal and get it finished quickly. It's a little bit like tearing off a Band-Aid or, I don't know, diving into a cold pool or the ocean. You're better off just diving in and getting it over with than, you know, bit by bit by bit. That's the painful thing, you know, if you're putting your foot into a cold water and then your calf and then your knees, and, you know, that's just horrible. But when you jump in, it's not so bad. So I see I have 3 people listening in, so, or watching. Say hello so I know who is listening to me. Is there anyone from my gang? I have a gang called the Susan Mayhem Gang, and it's a private group. And there's hundreds of us now, so on Facebook, and you're welcome to come join us. Just search Susan Mayhem Gang, and so I advertised that I was doing this over there. And so it might be some of them. Might be my moderator, Diane. She's awesome. She lives in New York, but she's in Florida at the moment. So if you're there, Diane, say hello. Ah, Tracy, hello. How are you? I know you. Tracy from Melbourne. Ah, Sam, hello. Sam, how can you listen while you're writing? I can't do that. Oh. Sorry, technology. That's, I hope everyone come back. Sorry. Internet's terrible in Australia, so I've had to go on to 4G as my wireless does not work. Okay, I've got notes. So everybody, are you coming back? The 3 people who are listening to me, Tracy, Sam, Rose, come back. Anyway, if you're joining me, I just went off air just for a minute. I'm back. I'm talking about how to write a book because I know a lot of people want to write books, or you've got a book you've half finished, or I don't know why you haven't written that book you want to write. But look, you know, I'm in the same boat, or I was in the same boat, that I spent years not writing. And I think I've got some bullet points here, so excuse me when I look down. But look, I think what stops people from writing or finishing their book is fear, because that's what stopped me. And I was always going to be a writer. From the time I was about 4 or 5, I knew I wanted to write. I couldn't wait to get to school so that I could learn to write. But, you know, life gets in the way, and I still thought I would be up until I was about 27. And then I ended up in a business after doing all these courses on writing, not university, but, you know, just courses that you do. And, yeah, I just didn't get back to it. And I think I embraced the idea of not getting back to it because I was afraid to try and do it, to try and write, because I really, really, really wanted to be a good writer and have a career in writing. But I liked the idea of imagining that I could be a good writer because I had all these little pointers. At school, I'd win awards for writing. Even when I was little, in grade 1, they gave me an award. I don't know what I wrote, and I had a poem published when I was 8. And I did a writing for film and television course, and the tutor thought that the synopsis or the treatment that I wrote was good enough to get a grant from the government. You know, I had all these little things that happened, and you'd think, oh yeah, well, she must have some talent. But I liked the idea of imagining that I could be a writer and that I could be a really good writer. And I didn't want to be proved wrong. So in my head, I could be a hero. But if I tried to do it and it turned out I wasn't a good writer, well, you know, I don't think I could handle that. I mean, I didn't think like this. It's just that I look back now, why did I not write for something like 23 years? I didn't write. When I got into my business, and my business did well, so it kind of took me away, but I should have kept writing on the side. Anyway, I decided at 50 years old, that I was going to give it a shot, and I started writing 300 words a day. That was my goal, a page a day. And then I kind of, to cut a long story short, because a few people who will listen to this have already heard about this, but to cut a long story short, I built a habit, which is what I suggest to you if you are starting to write, if you're halfway through writing a book. It's the same, I give the same advice. You know, I meet people and they tell me, a lot of people tell me when I say I'm a writer or a novelist, they say to me, oh, I want to write a novel. I've been always wanting to write a novel. How do you do it? And I say to them, well, just start writing. You know, you've just got to tell yourself, tonight when I get home, I'm just going to write half a page or a page, and you do that every single day. And if you can do that for 6 months or a year, or less, if you write more than 1 page a day, you'll end up with a novel. It's inevitable. You know, it's just like, how do you walk a mile? 1 step at a time. So it's pretty simple. But whenever I see these same people again, and almost without fail, I'm afraid to say, I'll say to them, how did your novel go? You know, how was your writing? Because, you know, after they leave me, they're so excited and they're pumped up and I'm going to do it and I can do it and I've met you, so I'm so inspired. And then when I see them, they tell me, oh, I wrote for a couple of days and then, oh, I got busy. And then, you know what it's like, they say to me. You know how it is. Things happen. And I always know the ones that are not going to even start, because they'll say to me, oh, yes, okay, I will go and do some writing. I'm busy for the next couple of days, but on the weekend I'll have some spare time, so I'm going to do it then. But see, the thing is, if you don't start straight away, if you come up with the excuse even before you've started, you will find other excuses once you've started. And the point is, life does get in its way, and it's something that you have to fight against. But, you know, like, it's like cooking dinner or a chore that you have to do. You find time to do it because you know you've got to eat. And writing is the same. You have to come up with some way of telling yourself that you're going to carve out 15 minutes a day, 20 minutes a day, half an hour. That's all it takes. Because if you keep writing, you'll actually end up building a habit where you write pretty quickly. You do learn to write faster. So what would once take me 30 minutes ends up taking... what would once take me 3 hours ends up taking me 30 minutes these days. You know, in the beginning to write 1,000 words or even 500 words might take an hour or more. No, a couple of hours. And now, you know, maybe I can write a couple of thousand words in an hour, which is about, I don't know, 8 pages or something like that. Okay, so I'm just going to get some water because I'm thirsty. Sorry about that. Hold on. It's hot today in Perth. It's been really cold and now it's really hot. Suddenly, like yesterday, jumper. Today, sleeveless shirt. Crazy. Okay, so what stops people? Fear, procrastination. And you know what? Procrastination is your response to fear. So you'll always find something else to do because it seems too big to start. But, you know, you've just got to start. So, and then my other thoughts about writing and getting things done is writing too slow. You know, part of the reason I've got this book written and into second draft and not published and not gone to third draft. I usually like to do first draft really quickly, and then the second and third draft are the edits, and then I send it to my editor and it gets maybe 2 more edits after that. She sends it back, I edit it, and then I send it over to a proofreader, all my early readers, and then I go through it again with what they've said. So 5 edits in total. So here's the thing. The reason that book is still sitting there is because I spent so much time going over every chapter as I wrote it. And the problem with that is you get really slowed down in the story and you tend to, focus too much on the prose. And you learn the more you write that the first draft is really ugly, and it isn't about being a good writer. Like, you could read back your first draft and think how bad you are, and I've done that, and it stopped me writing for 2 weeks when I was writing this particular book, because I went back and I read what I'd written the previous day, and it was horrible. It probably wasn't horrible, but to me it was terrible. And I thought to myself, gosh, I can't write. I may as well stop now. And I did, and I cried for 2 weeks because I really wanted to write, but in my head I'd decided I was a terrible writer. But I didn't have the experience then to know that first drafts are, you can't judge them. They're actually just getting the story on the page, and you want to get it down really, really quickly. For me, I'm a pantser, so there's 2 types of writers, and there's a mix of that as well. So a lot of writers like to outline, and that's fine to do that. I don't like to outline. I like to just organically grow a story. So from one chapter to the next, I don't really know what's going to happen, but once I finish a chapter, I have an idea from what happens in that chapter, what's going to happen in the next chapter. I'll start to think, okay, I need this event to occur, or I need these characters to meet, or I need this information to be conveyed to the reader. So I start to understand what I'm doing with the story. But every single book I've written, and most of the short stories I've written, I would think, I haven't actually known the end or who the bad guy is or what's going to happen. It kind of comes as I write. So that's the thing. You need to, it depends what you're doing. If you're outlining, I suggest you outline quickly as well. Just write whatever comes into your head. For me, I tend to, for a novel that turns out to be about 90,000 to 100,000 words, which is what my 3 novels have been, I tend to draft about 60,000 to 70,000 words. And then the second time I go over it, that's where I flesh it out and I start painting the scenes. Like I'll describe things a little bit more. I'll see where I've got to add some more bits in because I haven't explained something very well. And I might add in a chapter or an extra scene or something, or even a character that I realise I need. As the case was for The Troubles Keeper, my last book, I actually realised 3/4 of the way through the second draft that I'd picked the wrong killer. So, which was a bit of a horrible moment for me. And then I realised it couldn't possibly be the person that I'd written as the killer because he was in the wrong place. And I sat there for about 2 days thinking, how am I going to get this guy where I need him to be? And I couldn't. It was impossible. So I started thinking, well, if it's not him, who is it? And I worked out it was so obvious the person it should be, and it worked beautifully. I didn't have to rewrite very much. So that's what happened in the second draft. But when you write your first draft, you mustn't be afraid that you've written something wrong, because sometimes you'll find the tiniest little thing that you've written that means nothing, you can use, you'll realise later that's something that you need. Like, for instance, this character that became the killer was hardly in it. He literally had a few paragraphs, but he was the most perfect person. And so I just kind of changed the character in the, you know, the scenes at the end that I needed him to be in, the climax, and it worked. So you can't be afraid, and that's the problem. You can't make it too tidy, and you can't try and tie everything up in the first draft, or even the... Is that you back, Sam? I think it might be. Yeah, you can't try and tie everything up because I don't think it's possible. And it makes it really hard, and it makes it really slow. Because the thing is, the minute you finish your first draft, there's this yay moment where you think, great, now I've got the bones of my book. It is Sam. Hello. Sorry. I know, Sam. It disappeared just when I was talking to you. My internet connection. So I'm just talking about the writing quickly, and that if you're in your... Are you in your first draft, Sam, of your book, or is it your second draft or third? What's happening with this book that I want to read that you're writing? Because I'm talking about the fact that we need to write the first draft really quickly, or the first outline really, really quickly. Just get it done. Because once you get to the end, then you have something to build on. You've got the bones of your story, and you're not procrastinating anymore. You're not afraid as much that you won't be able to finish, because you've finished. So you've removed that little mind game, because writing is a mind game. It's taking control of all the fear, and taking control of your life, and getting time to write. Like, I call it stealing time, because I don't have any time. I'm like everyone else. Oh, you've written the outline of 3 books and can't decide which it should be. You are dithering. You are totally dithering, Sam. You need to finish one of those books. You need to do it quickly. You need to set a deadline, and don't wait for NaNoWriMo. I'm sorry, I think NaNoWriMo is great, but what it does is it makes everybody wait until November. So for those who don't know, NaNoWriMo is National Novel Writing Month. And so the goal is to write 50,000 words in 30 days. And that's great, and a lot of people do that, and you have to write the most scrappy, rubbish stuff to get 50,000 words in a month. Like I do, I write scrappy, rubbish stuff, but I do not wait until November. I am a working writer. I can't wait for 1 month in the year to write a novel, and you should be the same. Don't wait, don't procrastinate, don't find a million other things to do. I do that too. I sit there and I do all my paperwork in the morning and all my email answering, and lately I haven't got on to finishing my 4th book, And I know I'm kind of dithering, as you say, Sam, and I've got to get onto it. But when your business takes off, as Sam would tell you, when you're managing a business, which writing is a business, a lot of other stuff kicks in once you've got a few books. So my advice to anyone who's getting involved in indie publishing or even with a publisher, write as many books as you can before you are successful. Like, everyone's goal is to sell a lot of books, but what happens when that happens is that your workload increases. And I really wish that I had more books written before a lot of books started getting sold. But anyway, it's a good problem to have, and I am not complaining. So, we've got 2 other people back. Is that everyone else who disappeared before, after my connection hung up? Anyway, so I'm just checking my notes. Fear, writing too slow, and not setting goals. They're all the reasons that people do not finish books. Because, Sam, I'm talking to you. If you told yourself that you were going to write your book in 30 days, your draft, you would do it. It's if you write 15,000 words, it's I think 1,666 words a day. And what I did was I set up a spreadsheet with a little formula so that every day I would know if I was ahead or behind. And it was a game. And there's a lot of programs out there now. I think Scrivener has something like that in the program, which is a writing program, Scrivener, for those who don't know. Google it. So you kind of gamify it. So I know, if I wrote 2,500 words, then I've got less to write the next day. So I'd feel kind of good about it. And it's funny, if you set a goal to finish in a certain amount of time, you tend to use the whole time. So if I told myself I had to write a book in 10 days, I think probably I would get it done in 10 days because that's what I would do. But I don't do that because I don't want the pressure. But it's doable. And the thing in your head is you need to get it out of your head that a book needs to take a year or 2 years or whatever they tell you. You know, I look at these authors that release a book with a publisher once a year, and I'm sure everyone else does, and thinks, it takes a year to write a book or 2 years to write a book or however long your favourite author takes to release a book. But that's not the case. I don't for a second believe that most of those authors take 2 years or 3 years to write a book. As the ones who release every year, it doesn't take them a year. It's just that a publisher has a schedule, and they only have 1 slot a year for that author. So that author knows that. So they have 1 year to write a draft of a book, or not even a year actually, probably 6 months. But I'm sure they get it done quicker than that because it's got to go to an editor and back and forth. But the thing is, it doesn't take that long. It's just part of the industry. Luke Randazzo joined? Oh. Why are you watching my video, Luke? That's my nephew. Anyway, getting back to writing. Where am I? Tips if you get stuck. Set daily goals. Have we got all that? Set your goals. Okay. Tips if you get stuck in a plot. Okay, if you get stuck. Because here's the other thing that'll stop you from writing a book in 28 days is if you get stuck, which happens. I did write the very first book I tried to write. I think I got up to about 500 pages, and this is my first book, so I didn't know what I was doing, and I got stuck. And I thought, you know what, I can't finish this book. And I knew it probably was a bit bigger than my ability at the time. And I do plan to go back. It was a very cool book about deja vu, and I was trying to explain what deja vu was using science, and that people were actually travelling in time when they were deja vuing. So I will go back to that, but I was stuck. And so instead of persevering, as I would now, I stopped. So one of the things I suggest is that you, if you get stuck, you write around it. For instance, in The Troubles Keeper, I got stuck in a part. As I said, I got stuck with the killer, but I also got stuck because I had two of my characters, Mariana and Rory, the main characters, and she was staying in one place and he went off to another place. And then again, I realised that they actually needed to be together later on, and I couldn't work out again how to get them together. A lot of plot problems with book writing come from not having characters where they need to be and things not happening where they should, and that makes you stuck. So I decided I would leave it, and I knew where I was going in the next couple of chapters, so I ignored and just left that empty, that chapter, and knew that I was going on to the next chapter where I did know where I was going from. And I started writing and I finished that draft, and then I knew in the back of my head, I kept thinking, okay, I've probably got an extra 5,000 words in the second draft because I've got to get those two together and I'll have to write this big scene to somehow work it out. So I kept writing, kept working on the second draft, working on it, thinking, where is this scene? Because I couldn't remember by then. You tend to forget your story too, by the way. I don't know why, but by the time I'm back going through it again, I can't actually remember what's happened half the time. It's kind of a revelation to me. Anyway, I got to the bit and I thought, is this the bit that was an issue, that these two were apart? Because basically what had happened was he'd said to her, come with us, and she'd said no and closed the door. And I needed her to be with them. So I thought to myself, I can't believe I'm so stupid, because when they ask her to come with them, all she has to do is say, yes, I'll come. And that was my plot issue solved. And it literally was about maybe 2 sentences, and I'm thinking 5,000 words. So that's the thing. When you're writing, sometimes you're in the middle of a plot and it can be daunting, and your brain gets a little bit fried about what's going on, and you I don't know, lose your way. So what you have to do is just jump over that difficult spot, because when you come back to it, you are refreshed and you've also learned more, because first draft is about learning about your characters and your story. Even if you've outlined it, the characters come to life in the story as you watch them do things. You know, for me, I don't know if everyone writes this way, because a lot of people, I mean, writers have very different methods with writing. But for me, I don't know a lot about my characters. I have a rough idea. I might know, like, for instance, in Deadly Messengers, I knew that I was going to have a reporter, because I needed somebody who could get into places. So that was a good mechanism. I mean, reporters are just handy. And I knew I was going to have a police detective. I knew I was going to have a whole bunch of mass killers. But I didn't know them very well. And as I wrote them, I got to know them. So that's what happens in the second draft. You start to fill them out because you've seen how they behave and seen their responses, and you've written all their language, the way they speak, and you've just got to know the story. And usually the second draft is where I work out the theme. So what I'm saying is that you need to not worry so much about all those things. Just write, and don't worry if they say the wrong things or they do things that are a little out of character. You'll realise that in the second draft, and you'll start to realise the theme, and you'll be able to tease that out as you go. Okay, so that's one point. What else have I got? If you're also writing around, okay, we've got that. Write around where you're stuck. Another tip, which I haven't used, but I think it's actually a good tip, that if you're stuck, write that same scene from another point of view, just as an exercise to free up what's happening for you. My power is running out, but I've still got 20%. I might just check with my husband to keep an eye on the time. Can you tell me when my time is up? What's that mean?
Yeah,
Oh, I thought you were saying 5 minutes. Tell me, how long have I got? 20 minutes to go. Gee, I can talk. Okay. Yeah, right from another point of view. See, now the goal here is you are fighting against that little person that sits on your shoulder and tries to stop you. I always find that, we're really critical of ourselves, and writers are just the worst. Artists, writers, anyone that does anything creative, or probably just human beings in general, we're just always criticising ourselves. So you're always having this argument with this feels like a little horrible thing on my shoulder that's always telling me I can't do something and I'm not very good and this is stupid. And, I'm like you. I think I finish my novels and I send them out to people, and I'm just like so afraid because I think they're absolutely terrible. I don't think they're terrible, but sorry, that's exaggerating. I think they're okay, or I wouldn't send them out. But I don't think they're anything amazing. And I'm always surprised when I get the first reviews in and people are saying, oh, I love this book and I couldn't put it down. And because I don't know how it feels to read my books if they're a page turner. I try and make them page turners, and there's mechanisms to do that. But I don't know if I've succeeded. So I'm always frightened that it's just terrible and that I'm going to get terrible reviews and people are going to write to me and say, oh, I didn't like this one as much as your last one and actually I couldn't finish it, or, something horrible. This goes through my head. So I'm like everyone. So when I'm writing and if something sits on my shoulder, that horrible opposite muse, whatever the opposite to a muse is, and it starts telling me this is rubbish, you know what I say to them? I answer them and I say, you know what, it is rubbish, okay, right, maybe it is rubbish, but it'll just go out there with the rest of the rubbish and I'll just write another book, okay? So just get off my case and let me get back to work. Because you really have to fight that negativity. And, I try and speak positive. You should be saying to yourself, I'm writing a bestseller here. But sometimes, the negativity sneaks in. But, you're writing a bestseller. That's what you have to hope for, and that's what you've got to aim for. And as long as you're pointing in the direction, if you want to write a page turner, write a page turner. Tell yourself that's what I'm going to do. And if you read enough page turners, you can see there's a style with them. There's a cliffhanger at every chapter, and that's what I try and write. I try and make it that there's something dangling at that chapter and you think, oh, I need to turn this page because I want to know what happens because she just set something else up, and damn that woman. I often get emails from people saying, I started your book at 9 o'clock at night and I didn't get to sleep till 4 o'clock in the morning. I couldn't stop till I finished it. Or my Kindle battery ran out and I started reading again in the morning. That's music to my ears. But anyway, getting on with writing that book in 28 days. Let me see. Finish it no matter what. I said that, right? Finish it. Even if it makes 0 sense. Even if it's got plot holes that you can... Pauline Trotman, hello, is that you? That's my old friend Pauline. She lives in England. I grew up with her. Hello, Polly. Anyway, I better keep talking. I've only got 10 minutes and I've got to keep talking about how to finish a book. Trick yourself into not caring. That's what I do. I tell everyone it doesn't matter. No one's going to read it. It's not going to sell, and it's no big deal. That's what you really have to do to not get chewed up in your mind about books and novels and writing and what people think. You just have to think it doesn't matter, And the point is, if you can write a book in a month or 2 months, if it doesn't take you 10 years to write a book, if it doesn't work, and if it doesn't sell, and if people don't like it, it doesn't matter. Write another one. It doesn't take that long. And you have to try not to think that it's the be-all and end-all and it's your only chance to write a book. The first few books that you write are your learning books, and that's where you learn how to craft a book. And I know that now I've written so much stuff that I sort of know what I'm doing. Every time I start a new book, though, it's like a whole new experience. But I kind of understand the mind games because it's mind games. That's the trick. Okay, so, here's a couple of other things. Now, you may not agree with me on this. I know that people go to writing groups. I know some people enjoy writing groups, and that's where a bunch of you get together and you share your writing. And people go to these because it is kind of nice to have friends that understand writing, and you can share your writing with other people, and it keeps you on track because I think sort of there's an agreement in these groups that you have to bring your next chapter, and so that's kind of setting your goal. And when I was younger, I think I was about 23 maybe, when I was living in Brisbane, I did a course for a year called, I don't know, creative writing maybe. That's where I learned all the technical stuff about writing, which was handy. So I did learn some technical stuff, but the most stuff I learned was from just writing. But anyway, that was kind of like a writing group, so we'd get together as well after and catch up maybe once every 2 weeks besides going and learning stuff. And we'd share our work. But I don't totally love writing groups. Like, I'm not in a writing group, and I don't do courses or anything like that because I think that can be a little dangerous. It just depends on you and the writing group. But the thing is, I think you might be the best judge of what you're doing, and I think you need like one other person that can give you feedback, that can actually tell you honestly what they think of your work. So my husband does that for me, and he's really honest. Sometimes it upsets me. He's brutal, but most of the time he likes what I do. But I don't give him anything until the second draft, and then he'll say to me, "Oh, this bit's a bit slow," and then I'll say, "I know that. That's what I do in the next draft. But, you need to tell me, does it make sense? Is there a plot hole? Did you want to get to the end? Is it a page turner?" So, but you need someone like that. I agree. You've got to just have someone who's good enough to read your work. But I don't like the idea of getting into a room with other writers and a whole bunch of other writers, because everybody's got their own taste, and, they could really mess with your mind and tell you this is no good or that's no good or something's good when it's not. And then you'll just get confused. And the one thing that is the most important thing for a writer is to protect your mind, because that's where you work. So I try really hard not to get myself upset about stuff, not to think on bad stuff. And I definitely don't get too involved in what people say about what I write, and because I just really can't afford my mind to not do what I need it to do, because I trust that inside here is all the knowledge that I need to write any book that I want to write, or if it's not there, whatever the magical thing is that happens when I'm writing, the muse or whatever it is, it will find me. Because I've had times, like in Deadly Messengers, where I've got to the point in a plot where I need to know the next step and I don't know what it is, and then someone will give me the answer, like out of the blue. Like in Deadly Messengers, I didn't know how the guy was controlling the mass killers, the bad guy, and my son tells me. He'd seen something on a YouTube video. So, yeah, that you have to leave your mind open. And I believe that the muse or whatever, the gods of writing, if you're in the game, they will come looking for you. They will look after you. You have to trust that. Even in the days, like I have them, where I think, oh, I know I've got to write this scene tomorrow and I don't know what to do. And, my stomach churns sometimes. But, I talk to myself and I say, but you know what, I can do this. I've done it before. Come on, you can do it. So you've got to just keep revving yourself up. Now, Rose has written Agree with you on the writing groups. I work with one other author friend who will provide good critique and another who is an editor. The writing group is too diverse and doesn't get what I write. That's exactly right. I've got a friend in Perth who is a published writer with Simon & Schuster, and before that she was with Random House, and she writes kind of mysteries, and she was struggling with the last book that she released last year because she was in this writing group with published authors, like with big publishing houses, and they were telling her different things because they were confident writers, they had publishing deals and they'd put out quite a few books, as she had. I think this was her 4th or 5th book, and she'd been an editor as well for HarperCollins in the UK, so very experienced lady. But we had dinner one night and she told me she felt her book was a mess and she was really struggling because they'd got in her head. And I just said to her, get away from them. You don't need a writing group. My gosh, somebody who's published 5 books does not need a writing group. Seriously. Go if you want to have a cup of coffee or a glass of wine and, talk about writing and books and stuff, but don't take your work there. Oh my goodness. The other reason I don't get involved in writing groups or, I've got beta readers, but I don't send out my book to my early readers wanting them to, tell me if there's stuff I need to change, other than if I've made a couple of typos or I've, written, like somebody wrote once and said, oh, did you know that when she walks into the restaurant, she's got blood all over her, this character, and yet nobody notices? Because in the scene before, she ended up with blood on her. And I thought, oh gosh, I had to write in that she got rid of the blood, or, I had to get rid of the blood so people wouldn't notice. That's okay. But I don't want people to tell me that I'm totally off track or this isn't working and that's not working, because by the time I send it to early readers, it's been to my editor and pretty much it's working, give or take a little bit. Maybe there's a few patches I've got to tighten up, but it's working. So I just don't believe in, giving that power over to other people, even if you're not experienced. But if you're experienced, just don't do it, okay? It's just not good. You've got to protect yourself. Not that you're arrogant either. It's just that everybody has their own ideas, as Rose said. And you don't need those ideas in your head. Know yourself. Trust yourself. Just really trust yourself. I trust myself as a writer now. I'm on board with me when I sit down. We've got a job to do. Okay, so I'm almost to the end. Okay, and the final thing is, I'm just going to say to you, don't put pressure on yourself about writing. The first thing people say to me, and I always, I try and intervene before they say it. They say to me, oh, well, I've read anything that you've written, and, do you sell a lot of books? And but I try and say now, I say, oh, I'm a writer. I do really well, actually. But in America, nobody buys my books in Australia. But in America, I sell a lot of books. Because, when it comes to writing, it's an art, okay? It's like painting and gardening and anything else that you would do for pleasure, to fill your heart. And it's just a funny thing that when somebody says they're writing, that there has to be something at the end of it. Like, maybe it isn't a book at the end of it. Maybe you just want to write every day because you like to put words on a page. Or you do want to finish your book, but it doesn't mean you want to publish it and have a bestseller. Maybe you just want to write a memoir. Or you just want the satisfaction that you sat down and you wrote a story. I mean, most people want to publish, and I guess maybe you want to sell books, or you might want to make a living from it. I make a living from writing, which is great. It's been a dream. But I would do it for free because I love it. And when I don't write, I feel quite unhappy about it. Like, I hate all this paperwork and email. I mean, I like the emails from people writing to me. That's really nice. But there's a lot of marketing and stuff that you've got to do. And that I do it, and I do it happily because that's how I can reach more people. But at the end of the day, I like writing, and I'm not getting as much done, but that's life. You know, there's a lot worse problems to have. So anyway, take the pressure off yourself. You don't have to write a bestseller. You just have to finish a book. That's what you have to tell your mind for the first book. I am just finishing this book. I'm just doing it by writing a little bit every day, but you're going to write a little bit every single day, rain or shine. Do this for 3 months and you will become a writer. It's a habit. So if you can write 1 page a day, or make it a smaller goal, I'm going to write half a page a day, 200 words a day, whatever you want to make it, and keep a journal that you've done that. And then see where you end up, because do the math, you know, 200 words a day, what is that? Somebody do the math for me. Husband, 5, what?
No minutes.
No minutes left?
5.
I've got 5 minutes left. But can you do the math? What's 200 words a day? How many days does that go for a book?
Oh, for 28 days?
No, 50,000. If you want to write 50,000 words, divide by 200. 250 days? I think that's right.
Yeah, 200.
Okay, so 200 days, less than a year. And who cannot write 200 words a day? Come on, that's not even a page. You could do that. Like, you could just sit in bed and write that down before you go to sleep, honestly. You could, you know, do it while you're waiting at the bus stop or whatever, on the train. Okay, all right. I think in winding up, I think I've said everything I wanted to say. Now, the other thing is you need to come to my website, so susanmaywriter.net. If you go there, you can have 2 of my books for free. They're kind of small books, so there's Behind Dark Doors 1, which is 6 short stories. That's the other thing, you know, if you think that you are... Sorry, back for 2 minutes. Okay, so go to my website, www.susanmaywriter.net.